Hello, everyone, and welcome to Registrar Corp's webinar on why and how to become a Preventive Controls Qualified Individual, otherwise known as PCQI. My name is Betsy Shao, and I'm today's moderator. Today's presentation will conclude with a live question and answer session. If we run out of time, we're also happy to respond to your questions by email. You may submit a written question anytime during the webinar by using the Ask a Question feature in the top center of your webinar screen. A recorded copy of this presentation will be sent to all registrants. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Cynthia Weber holds a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and is a certified ISO 22000 and FSSC 22000 lead assessor. She has performed certification audits nationwide. She's a lead instructor for FSPCA's Preventive Controls for Human and Animal Food courses. Ms. Weber acts as Registrar Corp's Director of Food Safety Training and Curriculum. She's developed various food safety training and documentation tools, which have been utilized around the world since 2001. Cynthia, would you like to go ahead and begin?
Yes, good morning. And thank you for coming this morning. I'm happy to have you all here. We are going to discuss the PCQI, or the Preventive Controls Qualified Individual. It's a very commonly asked question we get. Who needs a PCQI? How do you become a PCQI? So we want to talk about those topics and help you understand, if you're interested in becoming one, how you go about doing that, and actually, what is it and why do companies need a PCQI? And it really all starts with the preventive controls rule. So we will be taking a quick look at the preventive controls rule and move into why a PCQI is required, what kinds of things a PCQI does, training requirements for becoming a PCQI, and then we'd like to introduce a new feature, a new way of becoming a PCQI, a fully online, on-demand FSPCA course. So we'll highlight that at the end as well, and then have time for some questions and answers from all of you. Really, everything starts with the preventive controls rule. The preventive controls rule is part of FSMA. There's 7 different rules in FSMA, and this is one of them. And it's a major rule for all the food manufacturers, food processors, and their food safety management system. The Federal Register has the preventive controls rule in it, and you will find that as the current good manufacturing practice, hazard analysis, and risk-based preventive controls for human food rule. So that's the important rule that we're going to be talking about today. That is the rule that applies to the food manufacturers and the one that's going to mention the PCQI. So the Food Safety Modernization Act was enacted to ensure the safe preparation of food products for human consumption in the U.S. Because we had a problem with food safety. We've been having outbreaks and really needed to take a look at taking a more preventative approach to food safety in the United States. And again, the Food Safety Modernization Act is set up with 7 different rules, so there's a few different things that it addresses, but this particular rule includes the good manufacturing practice and the hazard analysis, or the preventive controls rule, that we'll be looking at today. The preventive control rule applies to most manufacturers. Virtually all manufacturers that have to register with the FDA will need to address Subpart C, which is the preventive controls portion of the rule. Subpart C is where there is a requirement for food facilities to develop and implement a written food safety plan. So again, we're in the preventive controls rule, and that rule has several subparts. Subpart B is the good manufacturing practices, and subpart C is the part that requires the food safety plan and the preventive controls individual. So if that part applies to you, if you're a food manufacturer that registers with the FDA, you are going to have to implement this food safety plan with a few exemptions. There's a few industries that if you fall in these, they are exempted because they're regulated under other rules. So juice, if you're strictly doing juice and compliant with juice HACCP, if you're doing seafood and covered completely under seafood HACCP, if you do dietary supplements and you comply with 21 CFR section 111, alcoholic beverages or USDA regulated products, then you're exempt. And again, those are exemptions because they are regulated under other laws. So if you're with a facility that's partially regulated under one of those rules, but partially under FDA, then you're still going to have to address that food safety plan. So just want to make you aware that there are some exemptions, but for the most part, a food facility will need to comply with Subpart C and will need to develop a written food safety plan. The rule itself does not apply to farms or retail establishments. So we are talking about from the farm gate to the retail store, everything in between, but it does not apply to farms or retail establishments. So that kind of gives you the framework of who this affects. If you are one of those facilities that it does affect and must comply with Subpart C, then you're going to need a preventive controls qualified individual because they play a very important role in meeting the requirements of Subpart C for the risk-based preventive controls. And there are specific responsibilities for the food safety plan that the rule states must be completed or overseen by a PCQI. So this is why we need a lot of you trained as PCQIs. There's a lot of facilities out there that are going to need PCQIs. And facilities need a PCQI available to perform or oversee these responsibilities. And so we'll discuss what those responsibilities are as we move forward. But interestingly enough, the PCQI does not need to be an employee of the facility. So that means that if you're a small facility, you might not have that resource in-house. You might use someone from outside. You might use someone who's acting as a consultant to actually perform these responsibilities. Or you, as a trained PCQI, might be able to perform those responsibilities for another company. So it does not need to be an employee of the facility, but they must be available to complete the responsibilities and complete them in a timely manner. There are some time limits in there where things have to be done within a certain amount of time. So this gives a lot of flexibility. This means a small company might have someone that's not full-time, that's assisting them with these responsibilities. However, a large company might need multiple PCQIs. So they must be available to complete those responsibilities. So if an inspector were to come in and see that you're falling behind on things like records review, which is something that we'll talk about, then they might determine that you do not have enough resources as far as the PCQI goes. Maybe you need an additional PCQI, or if you're using an outside person, maybe they aren't there enough. So that would be how you measure how, if you need one PCQI, if you need more PCQIs, if they're an employee of the facility, or if you just don't have that expertise in-house and you have to reach out to a consultant and get a consultant in to be the PCQI, that would be another reason to use someone from outside. That gives us a little overview of why a PCQI is required, but let's take a little more detailed look. I mentioned that Subpart C requires that you develop a food safety plan. And the food safety plan is made up of these items that we have here. So really it all starts with the hazard analysis. Every company must perform a hazard analysis to identify what hazards need a preventive control. It could be hazards in your ingredient, hazards in your product, or hazards that are introduced in your process. You'll do your hazard analysis to identify all those hazards. Then you need to determine which ones need a preventive control. based on the likelihood and severity of this hazard, do you need to control that hazard in order to make a safe product? If you determine that it needs a preventive control, you have to identify that preventive control. You have to identify monitoring procedures so that you know if you are being effective in controlling that hazard. You need to have corrective actions in place and corrections in case there's a deviation. You need to do verification activities to make sure that you are staying within limits, that you are doing everything that you are saying that you're doing to control the hazard. There's also elements like a supply chain program and a recall plan that are required. There are record keeping activities, and there is reanalysis of the food safety plan as needed and every 3 years as a whole. So all of those activities need to take place. All of those activities make up the food safety plan that you have to have in place. And again, it has to be a written food safety plan. And that's where we come to the responsibilities of the PCQI. So under the Preventive Controls for Human Food Rule, the responsibilities of the Preventive Controls qualified individual include overseeing or performing. So there is some leeway for you to oversee some of these tasks being done, or you must do them yourself. But oversee implies that you are involved, you know people are doing it right, you know that they're fulfilling their responsibilities. So you're still involved as a PCQI. And those responsibilities include the initial preparation of the food safety plan, validation of the preventive controls, records review and reanalysis of the food safety plan, and other activities as appropriate to the food. There's some places where it requires the preventive controls qualified individual to justify things. For instance, if you're going to change some time frames, some things like that, then the PCQI is responsible for justifying those changes. So the preparation of the food safety plan would obviously involve the PCQI quite a bit in the initial phases, getting that documented and implemented, validation of the preventive controls. All those are kind of up front or again with any changes to the process, so that would involve the PCQI. The records review is a fairly substantial requirement because it's ongoing. You will need to review all the monitoring records, corrective action records, other records, and they need to be done in a timely manner. Most of those records need to be reviewed within 7 working days. So again, depending on the size of your company and how many records you are generating, that could be a big task. And remember that you can also delegate some and oversee, but you do need to make sure those people are fully trained and that you are keeping an eye on what they're doing and making sure that it's happening, because ultimately you're responsible for that activity. What is a PCQI? So how do you become a PCQI, or who can be a PCQI? This definition comes right from the rule. A qualified individual a PCQI is a qualified individual who has successfully completed training in the development and application of risk-based preventive controls at least equivalent to that received under a standardized curriculum recognized as adequate by the FDA, or is otherwise qualified through job experience to develop and apply a food safety system. So what the most common way of becoming a PCQI is through that standardized training. So let's take a look at those training requirements. The FSPCA, the Food Safety Preventive Control Alliance, is responsible for overseeing all this training, and they are the ones that developed the official course or the standardized curriculum that is recognized by the FDA. They also train lead instructors qualified to teach the course. So only trained lead instructors are able to teach the official FSPCA Preventive Controls for Human Food course. And that is the course that will give you the AFDO certificate. The Association of Food and Drug Officials, AFDO, and the International Food Protection Institute, IFPTI, administer certificates for those that complete the recognized course. So that's a very nice training record that clearly shows the inspector when they come to your facility that you have been trained, and you've been trained to that standardized curriculum that is recognized by the FDA. When you're looking at classes, there's a number of options out there. The standard, or kind of how they started out, the most common class was the 20-hour classroom training, and that is still available. So 2.5 days of classroom training. There's also some blended courses offered where FSPCA has done a portion online that you can take, and then you follow up with a webinar. And there's some that are just offered as complete webinars. You want to take a course that offers the AFDO certificate to make sure that the training is the recognized FSPCA Preventive Controls for Human Food curriculum. And up until now, there hasn't been a way to do that on a fully self-paced, a fully online course that didn't involve a blending or a webinar. But now we have a newly fully online and on-demand course. So that makes it very convenient. We have people all over the world that are interested in this course, and sometimes we get in places that it's hard to find training, or it's hard to find a webinar in your time zone. You want to do a self-paced model. Now Registrar Corp is offering this training. So we will talk about that a little bit more at the end. But overall, it's nice to understand that there's some different options. And a good way to know that you're getting the official course is the AFDO certificate. So you might want to check for that AFDO certificate when you're looking at the courses, and that way you know you're getting the standardized curriculum. The training includes really 3 sections, and this is, again, that standardized curriculum. So first you will go through some background and guidance information on food safety, things like the GMPs, chemical hazards, physical hazards. Then you'll move into food safety plan development. And the food safety plan, I know a lot of companies already have HACCP in place, but the food safety plan is a little bit different. It's a little different approach than HACCP. So in the course, there's practice developing the food safety plan against this regulation, this method of doing it, to make sure that you understand what you need to do to meet the rule, and what you need to do differently than what you might have in your HACCP currently to meet the rule. And then finally, there is a section on the rule itself. But really, by the time you get to that last rule, you've covered a significant portion of the requirements, and you'll already understand the rule and the requirements by the time you get to that final section. So it's a nice summary on the rule itself. So that's the standardized course, and that's what you'll find in the curriculum for any of these that are offering the AFDO certificate. I mentioned the online PCQI training. And again, this is brand new. We will actually start offering this early August. And we'll give you an opportunity later to sign up for a waiting list, and even give you a little discount there. So we'll give that to you at the end. But we are now going to offer the FSPCA Preventive Controls for Human Food course as a fully online and on-demand course. And that means it's completely self-paced. You can come and go as you please. You can work this in. There's no scheduled time for webinars or anything like that. It's completely self-paced. You can work through the 16 chapters of wonderful information all on your own time schedule. It is the standard curriculum, and you will receive the AFDO certificate. And participating in this course meets the requirements for a preventive controls individual. It is the first, and it is currently the only fully online, on-demand, or self-paced version of the food course, and it will be available in early August, coming up here. And I just wanted to give you a little peek inside because it's hard to picture what an online course would be like, but the standardized curriculum has 16 chapters. So this is broken into 16 separate chapters. You can do them, you have to do them sequentially, but you can do them one at a time, and you can even stop mid-chapter and come back to where you are. But each chapter includes videos followed by interactive exercises that allow you to work through the information, and you will practice using real-world scenarios. You will have some model food safety plans to work with. The training includes a downloadable PDF student manual, and that is the FSPCA student manual. There's sample forms, sample food safety plans, and other resources. And also, it is a big manual. You can also buy a printed student manual separately from FSPCA, and our training will have a link to the bookstore for you on that. And then there's the 20 hours. It takes approximately 20 hours to work through the program. And again, it's self-paced, so that's a nice, convenient way to do it. And upon completion, you do get the AFDO certificate. And that AFDO certificate, that's, again, we mentioned at the very beginning that that's managed by the AFDO and IFPTI. So once you complete our course, we have that you registered with AFDO and IFPTI, and once you complete our course, you will get that certificate. You'll actually go to IFPTI to get that certificate. Some benefits of the online training: you will learn the preventive controls rule at your own pace. I mentioned that it's about 20 hours, self-paced, includes videos and interactive exercises, and you will do a model food safety plan. You will work through each step of creating a model food safety plan for a model company, so you can become familiar with that and actually practice the different steps. So when you go to do your own food safety plan, you've had some experience with that, and you have some examples that you can look at. It'll help you understand the responsibilities of the PCQI. We ran through those, the actual preparation of the food safety plan, validation of the preventive controls, reviewing those records, and doing a reanalysis of the food safety plan as things change, as you add new products or processes, or again, every 3 years to make sure it's keeping up to date. And then you will gain experience and a deeper understanding of those steps to writing a food safety plan by completing the exercises and working through the process of building the food safety plan. I mentioned that you can reserve and get $100 off when you register for the course. So you can reserve at that link. And we will also be sending out a copy of the presentation, so we'll have that link in there for you. And again, if you reserve your course before we launch, and we will be launching early August, you will get that $100 discount on the course. We also wanted to make you aware of some of the other Registrar Corp services. So there you can do registration in U.S. agent services, prior notice filing, label, ingredient, and product review, FCE registration and process filings, and all our list of services there. Now it's time for some questions and answers. I'm going to take a look here at your questions, and we'll see what we can answer here for you. And again, if we don't get to your question, if it's very specific to you, I might leave it for an email answer, but we'll try and get through all the general questions here. So the first question, is it also applied in other countries? Yes, if you are selling food in the United States, you will need to meet the preventive controls rule. So this does apply to companies that are overseas that would be selling their food in the United States. Is this rule applicable to packaged drinking water? Yes, it is. Is the PCQI Can the PCQI also be the food safety team leader, or do we need to nominate another? That's up to you. There's no stipulation that they can't be the food safety team leader, and I think in many cases that will be a very appropriate assignment for them. It's a good spot for them to be in. How can you attain the PCQI certificate? Again, you would want to go to and take one of these courses, and our course would be one of the ones that will give you the certificate. What is the life of the certificate? Right now, there is no renewal period requirement. So right now, there isn't, it's not set at 1 year, or it doesn't have an expiration date. What is the difference between HACCP and the food safety plan? There is some minor differences in the two plans. The HACCP tends to focus on process controls, and the food safety plan really reaches out to some other controls. So it reaches into sanitation, allergens, supply chain controls. So there's some differences there, and the best way to learn about those differences would be to attend a course, so you can really get the nuances there. Is the certificate for the USA, or is it standard? It's standard. So there's only one PCQI certificate. So once you get that certificate, it would apply. Let's see. Is it necessary to have a PCQI sign or verify records? Yes, that's part of records review, would be a indication of review. But remember that the PCQI is required to either review the records or oversee review of the records. So if they're overseeing it, someone else might be, initialing or signing those records. But again, the responsibility for those being done correctly ultimately falls back to the PCQI. We have a few questions about if it's a requirement in Europe, is it an appropriate course in Canada? And the answer would be yes. So the FDA is regulating the food that's in the United States. If you're selling this food in the United States, then it needs to meet these requirements, and the course is the same for everybody. Can there be one PCQI for two factories? Yes, because again, it really depends on the size of your company and how much that PCQI is expected to be doing. We need to make sure we have enough PCQI or enough time for that PCQI to fulfill their responsibilities. But if you have two small factories, you might find it works very well to have one PCQI. But again, the measurement for that would be, is the PCQI able to get all their work done, and done in the right time frame? Is it necessary to have a PCQI person in the feed industry? Yes. In addition to the human rule, the rule for human food, there is a rule for animal food and feed, and that also requires a PCQI. There is a separate course for that because it is a separate rule. So you would want to take the course for a PCQI for animal food or feed. Let's see. Can PCQI be from top management? Yes. There's no requirement on who the PCQI is. How can we view the webinar again? We will be sending out some information after the webinar is completed. The 20-hour course has to be completed in how many days? We don't have a requirement right now. You would want to do it. You wouldn't want to drag it out too long, because I think you'll lose some of the, you might kind of forget what you're learning in between time. So I would say you want to be doing it, in a month or so, but we don't have a deadline on that right now. Is internal PCQI training recognized by FDA? Right now, FDA and FSPCA, the rule says you need to be trained to that standardized curriculum. So to be recognized, you would have to show that standardized curriculum is being met. And I'm not actually sure on the method of that. but typically you would be better off taking a course that has that FDA or AFDO certificate. I understand the course is self-paced. Can we go back and view a previously viewed chapter? Yes, you can. Once you complete a chapter, you can go back in and review the chapter. What type of company needs a PCQI? If you register with the FDA and sell food in the US, and if you are not, if you don't fall under an exemption, then you will need a PCQI. So if subpart C of the preventive controls rule applies to your company, you are required to have a PCQI. Are a food safety plan and a food defense plan the same? No, they're different. Food defense plan will be separate from your food safety plan. Although you do need to address those hazards in your food safety plan, but the food defense plan is separate. Does the course include any exam? That's a good question. The course does not have a final exam. So if you're in the classroom course, it's up to the instructor to pass you, and it's all based on participation. You have to participate, answer questions, do your food safety plan. In the online course, there is no final exam, but there are exercises, interactive exercises throughout the course. You need to complete those. And the way it's set up, they're broken into small sections, and you need to achieve 80% on that small section. If you did not achieve 80%, you can retry it. So you just need to successfully complete all of the content, and then there's no final exam. Can we merge HACCP and the food safety plan in the organization? Yes, you can use your existing HACCP plan. You might need to make some modifications to it, but you can bring that right into your food safety plan. There's no reason to have a HACCP plan and a hazard analysis and food safety plan that are separate. It's the same process, the same food, the same hazards. So you want to bring those together. If you manage them as two separate items, you're likely to have maybe some errors because they might start to drift apart and not be the same, and that's not a good thing. Let's see. Is it, let's see, I'm just running through the questions here. Does the documentation of HACCP need to be completed in accordance to HARP-C? What you will need to do is take that HACCP plan and put together a food safety plan in accordance with the preventive controls rule. So they don't really use the acronym HARP-C, but you need to do the preventive controls rule. We will be emailing out the presentation after the end of the webinar, so you can see this again if you need to. Does the course cover food safety or prevention for food crime or food fraud? It does include economic adulteration or food fraud. That is a hazard that you need to address, so that is included in one of the chapters. The price of the course, it's $799. So right now that's $799, and you would be able to get that $100 off if you do sign up on the wait list before the course is launched. And that doesn't mean you're committed. You can sign up on the wait list without using your credit card. So you can just sign up if you're interested now, and then you'll have access to that $100 discount as you move forward. Let's see. We have a couple questions about is a PCQI required and there's a number of different industries that people are asking about specifically. So again, it would be required if you are regulated under the FDA, if you need to register with the FDA, and if you aren't in one of those exemptions that I mentioned earlier on, you would need to have a PCQI. And one way to find out if you fall in the exemptions is to take a look at the rule. And the Federal Register is downloadable, a free download, so you can go into that rule and look at Part A for applicability, and there's some exemptions in there, and you can determine if you fall under one of those. Let's see. We have a question about getting a quotation for courses offered overseas. Our course is available worldwide, so the online course is available to you from no matter where you are, so you could access that course. Is PCQI required for food ingredient manufacturers? Typically, yes. Again, unless you fall under an exemption, that would be required. What is the difference between PCQI certificate and a food safety management system lead auditor? So the example here is an ISO 22000 lead auditor. It's very different. The PCQI is trained to do to build the food safety plan and to do those responsibilities, the records review, the validation of the preventive controls, things like that. A lead auditor is trained to audit to the certification programs. So SQF, FSSC, BRC, those are all different. Those are market-driven food safety certification systems, standards, and this is the law, the FSMA law or rule. So two different things. We have a couple questions along that line. Are the PCQI, is a PCQI required for SQF? A few questions like that. And so the answer would be no, they're two different things. For SQF, you're still going to need to have an SQF practitioner. It might end up being the same person if you're a small company, but a PCQI is different than a lead auditor, and it is different than some of those responsibilities in the food safety management systems. Other than FSPCA, who else is qualified to do the training? FSPCA does not actually do the training. FSPCA created the standardized coursework, and they trained lead instructors. So as a lead instructor, I was trained by FSPCA, and that makes me qualified to teach a course that would give out that AFTO certificate. So there's quite a few people out there who are qualified to do the training, and they've been qualified by applying to FSPCA to be qualified as a lead instructor, and then once they're qualified, then they go through the FSPCA training, and then they are authorized to do the training. So if you're looking around for training and you see an instructor offering it, if they are able to give you the AFTO certificate, that means they were trained by FSPCA and they're qualified to offer that course. Is it mandatory for a PCQI if we are already BRC certified? Again, those are, it's two different things. So BRC certification is wonderful, but that is a market-driven standard. And this is, the PCQI is required by the FDA. So if you fall under the preventive controls rule, if you have to do subpart C, then you will need a PCQI, even if you're BRC, SQF, or one of the other GFSI standards. Let's see. Does the PCQI have to be present in the facility during the FDA audit? There's nothing that clearly calls that out in the rule. It's probably a good idea because they're probably the one that knows the most about the food safety plan. But mostly the FDA will be looking to make sure they have fulfilled all their responsibilities, so that they can clearly see the records that they have done everything that the PCQI is responsible for. Is the content of the online course the same as the previous face-to-face course? Yes, it is. We use the same curriculum. But we have experience designing online training, and we were able to take that curriculum and design an online course that is effective in delivering that same content and giving you practice just like you would get in the classroom class. Will the food safety plan be agreed upon by the GFSI scheme? The GFSI schemes are working hard to coordinate with FSMA, but again, they are two different things and they have two different goals. GFSI is global, so they are, addressing the whole world. This is a rule for food that is sold in the US. So there's some differences there. They work hard to coordinate, but they are two different things, and one is voluntary and one is the law. So there's the audits by GFSI and there's inspections by FDA, and those are two different things. There's definitely benefits in being GFSI certified. It really helps prepare you. There's quite a bit of overlap between what you're being asked to do. The GFSI schemes are actually cover more. It's a whole food safety management system. So it's a broader scope. It includes the HACCP or hazard plan, depending, they all use different words, but that's very similar to the food safety plan. But they include more. They include management responsibility, internal audits, things that you won't necessarily see in the preventive controls rule. I'm just reading the questions here. What is the qualification required for the lead instructor course? If you're interested in being a lead instructor, you can go to the FSPCA website, and they have a list of what they're looking for as far as qualifications and background, and that is where you send in an application, and then they'll take it from there for you. Is there any prerequisite for attending this course? No, there is no prerequisite for the course. So typically in any given classroom, when I'm teaching the classroom courses, we have quite a variety of students, people who have really just beginning with food safety and people who have maybe been writing HACCP plans for 20 years. So there's quite a variety, but there are no prerequisites for the course. So the course does include that background material, the GMPs, the chemical hazards, biological hazards. So it really gives you some background going in. So it's very useful that way. How can you register for the course? You can sign up on the wait list now, and then we will let you know as soon as that's online, and then you can register online. Is the PCQI exempted for small companies less than 1 million? Yes, there are some modified requirements. You can find out if you're a qualified facility, and that has to do with your sales, but it's a little bit, the formula is a little bit more complex than just a million in sales. There's a few options there. So if you're a small company, you'll want to look in the rule for those exemptions, qualified facilities, and modified requirements. Let's see. If a PCQI left the organization, what is the timeline to acquire another PCQI? Those responsibilities are ongoing. So you would need to have someone on board to immediately pick up or oversee those responsibilities. So you need to have a PCQI. You wouldn't want a gap there. Can we have one PCQI for factories for multinations? I think that would be challenging. Again, there's no limit, or it doesn't say you can't be a PCQI for more than one facility. But again, you need to make sure that those responsibilities are taking place in a timely manner. Those responsibilities must be done. Where can we read about Section C? The Federal Register has the entire rule, so you will want to download the Federal Register, and that is the current good manufacturing practices and risk-based preventive controls for human food, and that will have all about that will have all the sections of the rule. Let's see. Is the PCQI training course available in India? Our course will be available online, so that is accessible anywhere. And you might also be able to find other courses in India. You could check with the FSPCA because they have a list of all the instructors. How does FSSC 22000 compare to FSMA? Again, it's a bigger scope. It's a whole food safety management system. It compares pretty well. If you're doing one of the GFSI standards, you're going to be well prepared for implementing your food safety plan. And FSSC has some requirements that are similar to the food safety plan that makes it maybe one of the most similar. But again, they are slightly different, and they always will be slightly different. Because again, FSSC 22000 is global, and this rule applies to food within the United States. Is PCQI required for food packaging industries? The food packaging manufacturers, those people who are actually making the packaging of materials in the United States, are not subject to the rule right now. Where can I find the rule on whether we qualify? Again, you want to look for that preventive controls rule, the Federal Register download. There's also a lot of great information on the FDA site. They have a FSMA page, and that will, there's a lot of questions there that will be able to help you out on what applies. Okay. There's quite a few questions about just specific industries. So I'm going to leave those. Again, you really want to look, because we can't really tell in a short question all of the, your whole situation. So you want to look in the rule. Again, Part A has applicability. So you can take a look there and see. Okay. We had one more question. What would be the route to validate that a person is trained on PCQI? And that would be to ask to see their AFDO certificate. So anyone who's gone through the course will have that AFDO IFPTI certificate. It'll have a number on it. And so that would be the best way to validate that they have been trained. That will do it for now, and I will turn it back over to Betsy.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that great presentation. Again, I'd like to announce that we'll be sending a recorded copy of this webinar along with a PDF copy of the presentation to all registrants. And remember, you can send us additional questions anytime by email to training@registrarcorp.com. This concludes our presentation. We thank you for joining us today.